Hey y'all, Randy here. Today we're going to cover enhanced input. This is kind of going to start a mini series here where I'll show you techniques and ways to implement certain plugins or other things within Unreal Engine, or just explain them. I've learned a lot within the past year and a half through making my own game here at Eternal Stellar Games. If you're curious about all that, I'll be releasing a devlog here soon. Soon being, I don't know, the next couple weeks to a month. Just depends on how much time I get to do it. But this plugin today, I am in Unreal Engine 5. However, I know this works in Unreal Engine 4 because I switched over to Unreal Engine 5 from 4, still using this plugin. But let's get started today. So why would you even want to use this plugin? The enhanced input plugin, that is. That's because basically the base input system, while good, is limited in that you will have to implement these features that the enhanced input system has, and basically just add more code to your game and take away more time, whereas you can already start with these implemented things. So if you're making a game, just use this. So let's get started. So go over to plugins in your project, you'll look up enhanced input and you'll see enhanced, click it, add it, restart your engine. I've already added it, so I'm ready to go though. And then now you'll see in the sub menu, if you go to add something, you'll see input action, input mapping context, and a player bindable input config. But imagine the input action as like a singular key on a keyboard and the input mapping context as the keyboard itself. So you have a mapping context filled with input actions, keys. So now we need to go to project settings. So go up there, scroll down to input, and you'll see I've already implemented them, but you'll have just player input. You need to switch to the enhanced versions of both of these, and then just switch that over, and you're good to go. And you can close project settings. But back into the content browser, let's go ahead and start making some input actions, our actual keys. So you know your move forward, your back, your left, your right, your shoot, your jump, anything that you can do. So we'll start a first one here. And the naming convention for the input actions is IA, capital IA, underscore, whatever the name is. So our first one will create IA underscore forward back. So that's just going to be implementing the forward back movement. Pretty self-explanatory. And then we'll add another one, and that's going to be the IA left right movement. And then we'll add the IA jump, and then IA shoot. So these are going to be, we're going to add some more further on, but we're just going to start with these. And so we will go into our forward back input action. Just go ahead and put it up here. And so the first thing you'll see is a consume input. That basically you just want to keep that on, to put it simply. Trigger when paused, you know, if you pause the game, do you want to still be able to trigger? Reserve the mapping, meaning you can only put this on certain context mappings, or it allows it to not be overwritten in certain ways. And then here's what really matters, the value type. So we have Boolean, float, 2D vector, and a 3D vector. And for the most part, you're probably just going to use Boolean and float. And so now we just have here triggers and modifiers. For forward back though, we're going to use the float value. And the float is what you're going to use a lot for movement. So left, right, we're also going to use float. And then we will go back. I'll show the triggers and modifiers later. Go to jump. The jump is going to stay bool, because you know your jump is just going to be on or off, like a Boolean, true or false. But let's go over the triggers and modifiers now. So the triggers basically, in order for this like event action, this input action to fire, these triggers must be held true. So we have things like coordinate action, which means if another input action is being run and it's being run currently, this can trigger, otherwise not. But we also have hold, so if it's being held down for a certain amount of time, it'll trigger. If it's just been pressed, which is kind of stupid since it already does that. Tap, which is if you hit it within a certain amount of time. And then you have modifiers, which then take the value of a Boolean float or a 2D or 3D vector and then change it. So we have like a negate, which just flips the value. So if it's a boolean, it's going to be true is false, false is true. It's a float, it's going to be 1 is going to be -1, and -1 is going to be 1. And then we have some other ones like that. You saw a dead zone. Dead zone is a super useful one for controllers. But if you want to customize your trigger modifiers, you can go in here, search up trigger, and you'll see input trigger, and you can create your own input trigger for these enhanced inputs. And you can also look at modifier and do an enhanced input modifier. And these are just super useful. So if the default ones don't allow you the customizability that you have, then these definitely will. And I switched these to a different folder. That's just my own personal preference. You don't have to do that. But we're going to create some more input actions. We're going to create the IA turn. And then we're going to create IA turn rate. Anything to do with a rate is going to be controller related, at least in my naming conventions. So we're going to have lookup as well, and then we're going to do a lookup rate. So the turn and the lookup are with like a mouse, and the turn rate and the lookup rate are going to be with a controller. And so we're going to change all of these to floats. And that's just, we're just changing them to floats just because it's not going to be true or false. We can actually change how fast we're moving or how fast we're looking or turning. So we need that variability of degree that a Boolean just doesn't provide. But now we're going to go and start creating our input mapping context. So we'll create our first one, naming convention is IMS. We'll call it looking, and then we'll create a second one called IMS actions. The reason I split them up is because typically with like your mouse and your joysticks themselves, those mappings aren't really ever going to change. But if we go into here, you'll see you can hit the plus button, and you can go in here and add your input actions. And so that's what we're doing. So for the looking, we're going to add lookup rate, turn, if I can find it, there we go, and turn rate. And so then furthermore, you can add as many of these as you want, by the way. If you'll see here, you can add sub areas or sub structures here that contain information, more triggers, modifiers, and then the actual key bindings. And so we're going to key bind. You can look up in the box the key binds. So that's what I'm doing, looking up the gamepad key binds. You can do this for VR, for mouse, anything you want. Like the basic input system. So we got the lookup, we got that set to mouse Y. We're gonna get the turn to mouse X. We already did that. We're just setting up the gamepads now. And again, you can put these to whatever you want. But then move forward, I'm gonna add some modifiers to some of these. So the controller based ones, if it involves a joystick, I add a dead zone just because most controllers do have some area that requires a dead zone. And for some reason my mouse, I have to put a negate on mine, otherwise I'll look the opposite direction, or I don't know, maybe I'm doing something weird. Well, let's switch over to our actions mapping context. And so we'll add the forward back, we'll add left right. I should add jump next. Or no, jump. And then we're gonna add shoot. There we go. All right, so I've added those. And now we can put our keys that we want into it. So for forward back, we're gonna add a couple different key bindings. One for forward of W and S, and if you have the little keyboard like you just saw, if you click it and then you hit whatever hits next, it's binded to that. So I click it and I click D, A, and it instantly binds it, which is really cool. And so I'm gonna bind all these, and then for the S, you're gonna want to negate it. For the A, you're gonna want to negate it, because if you didn't negate them, you would only move one direction. So you have to negate one of the keys, that way you can go left and right and forward and back, because they're both inputting, like for instance, a value of 1. And so you want to negate one of them to a negative. And then again, if it's a thumbstick and a controller, add a dead zone. and we'll take care of the jump and shoot later. So let's go ahead and open up our character and pull up an event begin play if you already don't have one. And so we're going to add something. We're going to add these mapping contexts because right now they have no correlation to the actual controls of the player. So if you look up in the Blueprint event graph, you look up add mapping context, you'll see it, and then we can duplicate it, connect it together. It doesn't matter in which order they are in. They will both be added to the player. We'll add actions, add looking, compile it, and we get an issue. We need one more thing. We need a subsystem. We need a subsystem to connect this to. So we'll just look up, what we're looking for is the enhanced input local player subsystem. And so we'll connect that to target. And then we're going to do the exact same thing for the other one. And in reality, if you wanted to, you could add as many mapping contexts as you like. And you can actually change these later on. So if you want to add mapping context, you can remove these and you can add others. So this is not final by any means. But we also have a priority. So if you have similar key bindings on different mapping contexts, which one will take priority? And then there's an options thing, which just provides some options for the mapping context. But I haven't used it that much, so I don't know a whole lot of knowledge about it. I haven't needed it yet. But if you got any questions, I'll look into it. And you can see you just break some of these values. All right, so moving forward, so we've got our normal, basic input systems here, with not a lot of customizability. They have just like pretty much their value, like their excess value and their execution pin, but they don't really tell us anything else. And so in reality, all the stuff that the enhanced input function provides you could actually probably code and plug yourself, but it just takes so much time. But we're going to look up our enhanced input actions. So those are the values right there, and then above are the events, and we want the events. So we'll call the forward back event, and we're going to call the left right event, enhanced action event. And you can see there are a lot more pins on these, a lot more customizability. So what we've got here, we've got a triggered, we've got a started, an ongoing, a canceled, completed, action value, elapsed seconds, triggered seconds, and input action. The triggered fires every frame that the action is triggering. So if you hold it down, it's going to keep firing. Started only fires once, so you have to let go of like the space bar and then hit it again. Ongoing just checks if it's still triggering. The canceled, we don't have that right now just because we need a modifier for that. Completed sees if you're stopped doing it, and then you get just the other ones are pretty self-explanatory. But the canceled one, like let's say for instance, we did want that canceled one, we would have to add the hold modifier, and let's say you didn't want that actual hold for your value, you can just set the hold to however many seconds you want, and what we could do is set it to like 0.001. That way it's so small that it doesn't matter how quick you hold it or hit your key or whatever, it's going to register it being held because the requirement for that is so small, so you can use it that way. Or you could set it to like 5 seconds and see if you cancel. But it's a great one. I've used it in a couple projects I've made. And so we are now going to connect some of these. So we'll connect the triggered just because we're moving. We want to constantly check where our movement value. And then we'll connect the action value to it because that's what we need to do. Compile, save, and we can go ahead and just test it now. And we can see, we can look around, but we cannot move forward or left or right. And I know why that is. All right, so we need to go back into our player controller. I made a mistake here. So we need to go up here. We got the wrong player subsystem. So there's actually two. It's very weird. I'm not really sure the difference between them, but we need the one that calls for the player controller. So I grabbed it already And so if you look it up, you'll see enhanced player subsystems, and then you'll see another one under the player controller itself. You want the one under player controller. That's the one we need. And so again, you'll just connect it right up to the mapping context. And then we are going to call the player controller itself. And this is not going to work. Yeah, I knew it. So this is not going to work because that's just getting a controller. We need the actual player. We need to get the player and its player controller. So we grab it. We can input it, and then we can just duplicate it over here, connect it, go ahead and compile, save, and it should work perfectly fine now. Yeah, so make sure you're doing it that way. But let's move on. Let's go ahead and start adding some of the other ones. You can go ahead and just start deleting and adding some of the stuff. So down here, we'll add the yaw and pitch. So we'll grab them, turn rate and look up rate. And then if you see over on the right, I already added the jump, and all that is just the started and completed, connecting the boolean for jump and crouch. I did mess up here a little bit earlier. I was trying to test some things, but just keep following along. So we're adding turn, and we're adding look up, and actually I flipped them around. So down here is for the mouse, and so remember I said earlier, I need to remind myself of it, I guess, is that anything with my naming convention with the rate at the end is related to the controller. So the turn and look up is going to be for the mouse, and we're connecting the values. And then the turn rate and the look up rate, that is going to be connected. Oh, I guess I didn't add these either. So we're going to add triggered again because it's for looking. Add trigger to that, and then connect the action value to that. We don't need to really change anything else. And let's go ahead and test this out to see how it works. All right, so we can move. Good. And then we have an issue with jump. Or do we? Actually, no, I think it works. Oh, no, it doesn't. It's not working. This is why. So we need to add the actual values to it. So space bar and the button. And then you can add the game pad or the controller itself. And you don't need to put any modifiers on this unless you want to. Right trigger for the gamepad for this. And then go back and it should work fine. But then we're also going to implement the shoot. So you just create a object reference to the rifle because it's going to work a little bit differently than the base system for Blueprint. And you'll just call the on fire weapon. Yeah, they're on fire projectile. That's what it is. And that's just the event they've already made in this base. And so you're just going to connect them. And we need to now check if it's valid, because like when we spawn into the game and we start shooting, even though we don't have a weapon in our hands, it's going to cause a lot of issues because it's going to try to get a null pointer, and null pointers are mean and they will crash things. So we always need to check if it's valid. So we go to the blueprint rifle, and on the end of this function, we are just going to set our rifle. So that way, the end of this function is just like when we pick it up. So when we do pick it up, it's going to set our reference to the rifle so we can call it correctly. So we go into the game, we go and pick up the rifle, and it shoots. So it should work. Go ahead and close it. Close. Yeah, there we go. Close it. Jump. Just set it, like I said, just before it started. And fun thing here, if you set a trigger, this is a really good way of showing the trigger. Trigger fires every frame, or as much as it can, as you can see. So yeah, lots and lots of balls here. And so if this is how you want your gun to work, you can set it to triggered. If this is not how you want it to work, then set it right back to start. Also, epilepsy warning. Sorry about that. This one, go ahead and close it. And so yeah, that's how we set up the triggered, or for the shoot. And like, we'll go back in, and it should work fine. Yep, pretty normal now. Okay, so I wanted to show you guys one more thing. So this is my own project for my own game right now that I'm making here at ESG. And so you can see I've added multiple mapping contexts. And I have like a pause button set. It gets pretty complicated, but I've got the movement, which looks pretty much like the ones we already did. Nothing too much there, but I've already got the move forward and backs, some more implementation. I've got a sprint key set up, so you can see I'm using the Boolean value as well, and the started and the completed. And this is for the left or right. Again, looks pretty much the same. And I've also got another one. This one's probably my more complicated one right now for jump. We've got triggered, started, and completed, and I'm also checking the elapsed seconds. And so this is what it could look like in a project. And it can get super complicated, or you can make it pretty simple. It's up to you, whatever you want to do with it. So yeah. Alrighty, well, I hope you guys found that video helpful and entertaining maybe in some way, or maybe not. But I'll probably be releasing maybe a part 2 to this sometime here soon, so just let me know if you want to see like the input mapping config or any other thing. If you have any other questions about Unreal Engine, the certain plugins, certain things at all. I'm a computer science person, so I know a little bit about this stuff. So just let me know. But if you have any questions, comments, concerns, whatever, just let me know in the comments, and go ahead, like, subscribe, maybe if you liked it, I guess. And if you want to see other tutorials, just let me know. And I'll probably be releasing a devlog for my actual game that I'm developing here soon as well. Keyword soon, if I have time. But just keep an eye out and look out for that. And otherwise take care, y'all. Randy out.